Senator Hume.
Thank you, Deputy President. I rise today to speak on a matter of public importance introduced to this place by our colleague from Victoria, Senator Collins. She wishes us to discuss putting health and education ahead of a $7,000 a year tax cut for investment bankers and a $17 billion tax cut for the banks they work for. And what a pleasure it is to receive the opportunity to stand in this chamber and speak of the government's record and priorities. Deputy President, the Turnbull government is in fact the only side of politics that will fully fund the essential services that all Australians rely on, and in fact only a growing economy that fuels growth and job creation, combined with prudent fiscal management, reining in the profligacy of Labor governments past, will ensure that the essential services like education, like Medicare, hospitals and the NDIS can be guaranteed. Deputy President, the education reforms introduced to the coalition by the coalition to this place, the reforms that deliver record funding to schools year on year, the reforms that the Labor Party, I remind you, voted against, are in fact game-changing. The coalition's quality schools reforms deliver an additional $23.5 billion on top of the 2016 budget for Australian schools over the next decade, and will ensure that the investment is distributed according to need, as originally envisaged by David Gonski's review of school funding in 2011. The coalition reforms ensure students with the same need and within the same sector attract the same support from the Commonwealth Government, regardless of where they live. Now, these are real, committed dollars, needs-based and fully funded. Deputy President, the coalition has guaranteed Medicare and the pharmaceutical benefit scheme with legislation, guaranteed in legislation. It has established the Medicare Guarantee Fund to ensure the ongoing funding of these essential activities. Over 86% of GP visits were bulk billed last year, 21 million more than in Labor's last year. Hospital funding is now at record levels, increasing from $13.3 billion in 2013-14 to a record $22.7 billion in 2021. That's a 70% increase. And after this date, the Coalition's new National Hospitals Agreement, the government has committed to an additional $30.2 billion in public hospital funding for the 2021 to 2024-25, taking the overall investment during this period to $130.2 billion. This means more hospital services, more doctors, more nurses, with increased funding year on year for every state and territory. And for the 13 million Australians who rely on private health insurance, the Coalition has taken steps to ensure to lower premium rises to make private health insurance more affordable and easier to understand. Our no jab, no pay policy resulted in 210 extra children immunised in its first year, and 12 to 13-year-olds will now be immunised for HPV. To help the 1 in 5 Australians that have mental health problems, the Coalition government has increased mental health funding to around $4.3 billion this year, and the 2018 budget also includes $1.4 billion for new and amended listings to the PBS, including medicines to treat spinal muscular atrophy, breast cancer and relapsing-remitting multiple sclerosis. That is guaranteed. That's a priority. That's where the Coalition's priorities lie. And of course, Deputy President, the Coalition government is the only side of politics that can guarantee a fully funded NDIS without more or punitive taxes. That's what economic management and fiscal responsibility can do, Deputy President. More and better guaranteed essential services for all Australians without the burden of higher taxes. The electorate know it. They can feel it in their hip pocket. They can see it in the number of job ads. They can hear it when they talk to their friends and their neighbours and their workmates. It's only Labor, Deputy President, who have not so much a tin ear, but more have turned a blind eye to these facts. They are in denial, Mr Deputy President, and they are doing this because they're starting to doubt themselves. They're starting to doubt their own policies. Why aren't they resonating with the Australian workers anymore? How could Labor potentially be the first party ever to lose a by-election to a government? What an awful, sick feeling that must be. Labor is starting to doubt their own rhetoric. Why do they sound so bitter? Why do we sound so bitter and envious about anybody that's had a go and done good? What base element of our nature is it that makes us want to slash the sickle of socialism through every tall poppy in the country? But most of all, Deputy President, you're starting to doubt your leader. You're starting to doubt your leader, and we can see why you would do that. It's so easy to do. After all, it wasn't all that long ago. It wasn't all that long ago that Mr Shorten himself believed in company taxes. We've heard the quotes over and over again in this chamber, Deputy President, from Mr Shorten himself, from Mr Bowen, from Mr Lee, from Mr Hawke, from Mr Keating. The number of Labor ministers, past and present, that believe in the power of company tax cuts to reinvigorate an economy, to grow and invest, help businesses grow and invest and employ. Indeed, Deputy President, the seeds of doubt in Labor's political strategy have been sown for some time, and now they have moved inexorably beyond green shoots and well into the discontent and the triffids of dissent and disloyalty. While Mr Shorten spent the weekend spewing forth invective at the members of the crossbench who supported leaving more money in Australians' hip pockets, the member for Grayndler was extolling the virtues of cooperation between companies, between government and business. And to his credit, Deputy President, there is one respectable member of the Australian Labor Party who understands the business community's vital role in society. Mr Albanese's Whitlam oration implored his Labor colleagues, and I quote, to engage constructively with businesses large and small, and he reminded his colleagues that we respect and celebrate the importance of individual enterprise and the efforts and the importance of the business community. Deputy President, I'm not exactly sure who the member for Grayndler meant when he said we in that sentence, because far from respecting the efforts and the enterprise of the business community, Mr Shorten continues to paint those hard-working business owners as pariahs and has all but declared that should he become Prime Minister, he will wage a war on business. And of course we've seen that nowhere more effectively than today. The mistrust was amplified and justified today, topped off by the announcement that Mr Shorten will repeal the company tax cuts. He will roll back company tax cuts, and that did not go to caucus. It didn't go to shadow cabinet. It didn't go to the Expenditure Review Committee. It was a captain's call. No wonder Labor are worried. The opposition's hatred of banks is so convenient, yet so misguided, and it of course is largely theatrical. Surely Labor must know that the banks to which they refer are already Australia's 4 biggest payers of corporate tax, and this is well before the bank levy. Deputy President, the banks have moreover, Deputy President, the banks employ more than 170,000 employees, 170,000, and the average bank teller earns $48,000. The average personal banker earns $55,000. The average mortgage broker earns $59,000. This is not the top end of town, and yet this is who Labor will punish, and there are 170,000 of them, and Labor treats them like greedy crooks. Well, shame on you. Shame on you. Deputy President, the opposition leaders wish to have a class warfare election where he pits one Australian against the other. Well, what disrespect, what disdain he must have for those he wishes to govern. But it applies equally to all of those opposite. Don't you feel grubby when you hear the lies that you're told you have to peddle? Don't you feel the shame when you're sent out time and again like some luckless boxer into the ring with talking points full and loaded with personal insults, or worse, dripping with sneering derision towards hard-working Australians whose only crime is to have made good? Labor may make hollow promises of more money for this and increased billions for that, but redistributing the wealth of others rather than growing the wealth for all is intellectually lazy and irresponsible in the extreme. It's no secret that Labor have no plans to grow the economy, no plan to increase wages and no plan to create jobs. Moreover, Labor has no shame. Where is the pride in the party you once were? Mr Shorten will lead this opposition from nowhere to obscurity. For you have defenestrated your history, you have defenestrated your values and your credibility, and now you have thrown away your relevance to ordinary, aspirational Australians. Deputy President, it mystifies me.
Thank you, Senator Hume.